Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today. We're going to give everybody a couple minutes to join, and then we will get started, probably just a few minutes past the hour. All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar called Fighting Identity Theft, How Building Coalitions Can Help. This webinar is brought to you by the National Center for Victims of Crime in partnership with the FINRA Investor Education Foundation, as well as the Identity Theft Resource Center, the ICRC. Established in 2003 by the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, the FINRA Investor Education Foundation empowers underserved Americans with the knowledge, skills, and tools they need to make sound financial decisions. The Identity Theft Resource Center is a nonprofit organization established to empower and guide consumers, victims, businesses, and government to minimize risk and mitigate the impact of identity compromise and crime. My name is Laura Cook, and I am the Director of Training and Technical Assistance with the National Center for Victims of Crime. A few housekeeping items that I want to note before we get started for anybody who may be new to the Zoom platform. You'll see in the middle of your screen toward the bottom, there is a chat icon as well as a Q&A icon. The chat icon, you can send a message to all panelists. I see Lori's posted. Hi, Lori. Thanks for joining us today. You can also send a message just to me or just to Sarah, our presenter, who I'll introduce in a second. You can also send them to Jazz Russell, who is dealing with any sort of IT or technical issues. So if you're having issues with sound or anything, you can send a message to Jazz Russell there. If you have questions as we move through the webinar, please type them in the Q&A box. So if you click there, you'll see a box pop open where you can type your questions. I will ask them to Sarah at the end of the webinar, and we'll answer them in the order that they've been asked. And so before we get started, I do want to briefly introduce our presenter, Sarah Goelz. Sarah joined the Identity Theft Resource Center in 2016 as the Grants and Coalition Program Manager, following 5 years with the Better Business Bureau of San Diego, Orange County, and Imperial counties in California. There, she honed project management skills through management and training of the complaints department and coordinating shared objectives through multiple departments. She ensured compliance with national policy, analyzed and tracked statistics, developed a training procedure for newly hired employees, and handled escalated business and consumer concerns. Sarah received her bachelor's in public administration at the San Diego State University in 2018, and Sarah and I currently have been working together for a few years on the National Identity Theft Victim Assistance Network called the NITVAN program. This program was funded through the Office of Victims of Crime, and Sarah is going to tell you a little bit more about the NITVAN program today. And so with that, I will turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Laura. As Laura mentioned, we have been working on this NITVAN project for about 3 years now, and the purpose of NITVAN, which was originally established in 2010, is to expand and improve outreach and capacity of victim service programs to better address the rights and needs of victims of identity theft and cybercrime. This is a nationwide network comprised of collaborative regional, statewide, and community-based coalitions, where we currently have 14 regional and state identity theft coalitions, that actually represent the different regions of the U.S. So what we're here to talk about today is the work of these coalitions, the progress they've made in their service areas, and how their experience and what they've done can potentially help you in any collaborative effort or coalition model that you wish to implement to try and tackle identity crime. One of the highlights of NITVAN was the Coalition Toolkit we recently released, and we will, of course, be doing updates this year. That's a culmination of the work of the coalitions that provides examples from coalition building to PowerPoint presentations to outreach and communications, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You will have access to this resource, and you can definitely go to the NITVAN website, nitvan.org, to access this, and I'll be highlighting different pieces from the toolkit as we go along. So what we'll be focusing on is who is helping identity theft victims, what resources are available to service providers who want to increase their capacity and expand their services to include identity theft victims, where can you find these resources, and how can our coalition's experience, best practices, lessons learned help you do what you need to do. So a little bit of background. I'm sure everyone is aware that identity theft is alive and well, and identity crime is an ever-growing problem that is constantly evolving. Identity crime impacted 14.4 million Americans last year, with 16.8 billion stolen from victims, as reported by Javelin Strategy and Research in their 2019 identity fraud study. And as you see these statistics right here from the FTC Consumer Sentinel Network, clearly the various types of identity theft are thriving, unfortunately, and are definitely growing. And these are just reported incidents. Oftentimes, victims don't report, whether it's shame, embarrassment, feeling that reporting won't do anything, but these definitely are higher numbers out there than what is currently being reported. And as you see, it's not just typical credit card fraud when you think of identity crimes. It ranges from employment or tax-related fraud, utilities fraud, loan or lease fraud, someone using a person's identity to secure government benefits. All of these things happen daily, and with the work of the coalitions, they're working to mitigate that in their different service areas, as well as have a national network that allows any service provider, any person in the region, through the coalitions and through this network, to be able to build their capacity and help more victims in their area. So a key aspect of identity crime that makes it a bit unique is that the victim is the one who has the burden to report. And a lot of times people think it's easy that, well, the victim can just call their credit card company or their bank with a phone call and everything is resolved. And while that is the case for some victims, other cases can involve months of work by the victim. And they, again, carry the proof of burden when trying to mitigate the identity crime that can involve several organizations and entities. and victims have to navigate and go through the different dispute and reporting channels of different agencies within their state and oftentimes in different states. And as my CEO, Eva Velasquez, points out, no other crime requires a victim to report, tell their story, and keep track of all the steps they have to take with these different agencies to be able to mitigate what's going on with them. And one of the goals of NITVAN is to try and at least streamline the knowledge and resources available to any service providers so that they can all have the accurate information, updated resources to be able to help these victims and hopefully mitigate the runaround and take some of the burden off of these victims. Another important impact of identity crime is that aside from the economic hardship that many victims experience, there is also a mental and emotional aspect to being a victim, and this is oftentimes overlooked. And since 2003, my organization, ITRC, has surveyed self-identified identity theft victims who we have helped through our contact center. And this survey that we did gauged the impact to these victims' lives over the course of the year since they spoke with one of our advisors. And the purpose of this aftermath survey is to understand the effects of identity theft on victims beyond the known financial needs. Identity theft victims do experience emotional, mental, and physical harm aside from the economic hardship that people think is really the only factor they deal with. And our study highlights the issues that these victims have, whether it be with sleeping, increased stress levels, increased fatigue, persistent aches and pains, headaches. I mean, it is truly a real impact outside of the economic, and oftentimes that can be a more lasting impact even after the economic situation has been resolved. And of those that had responded to the survey, 31.9% sought mental health support. And even of those, 44% did not believe it would help. So this is clearly something that needs to be taken into account, and a great thing with these coalitions is they also address these issues. They look at the economic and non-economic issues that victims are experiencing, and through these collaborative efforts, they have all of the resources and tools victims need, whether it's with their organization or one of their peers within the coalition. So one of the key aspects of coalition building is creating partnerships. The coalition building provides a network of shared purpose, access to information and resources, and can serve as a triage center to identify who in your network is best equipped to assist a victim. Coalition building to mitigate identity theft crime in your area and build capacity allows you to create a partnership between the different organizations and industries to address the gaps in services for ID theft victims. It helps reduce the duplication of efforts and resources for agencies providing direct victim services, and it also allows partners to utilize each other's strengths that they may not even have been aware of, and to build capacity to assist victims through partnership with each other. And this also allows for cross-victimization assistance when identity theft is a co-occurring secondary crime, which happens a lot more than I think people realize. So stakeholder engagement was something that was a big focus in the beginning of coalitions, establishing their network and getting the word out there, and bringing the different stakeholder groups again to the table and securing that commitment is a first step, and you will get nowhere if you don't have all the people you need at the table. Knowing who to engage and who to bring to the table is an important first step, and knowing who the key stakeholder groups are allows you to identify the strengths of services available in your area already, and helps you assess the gaps that need to be addressed. You don't want to establish a coalition with your stakeholder groups and tackle an issue that already has decent representation and adequate resources. You want to make sure all of the services that victims need are available in your service area. And under NITVAN, there were several coalitions that did extremely well in identifying key stakeholders and effectively engaging these groups. Many actually built upon the partners and networks they already established through their own agency, and they use that as a foundation for their coalition membership. You should always first look to your existing network to see what key stakeholders you have available, and once you establish that beginning core group, they can also help you with outreach and membership recruitment. Once you have that buy-in, A lot of times you can use those who bought in and who want to be at the table to bring others to the table as well. Networking is always something that is consistently going on, and these coalitions constantly are looking for new partnerships, to not only help their members, but what can their members bring to the table for them. And having a well-rounded group of stakeholders that represents the different services that can be impacted by identity crime and the various agencies victims must work with is key to building the adequate capacity you need within your collaborative effort to truly address all of the rights and needs of these victims. So outreach and relationship building was done in particular with these three key stakeholder groups. So law enforcement clearly is a big one. They're the ones who prosecute the perpetrators, and oftentimes victims do need to file a police report to be able to make headway in mitigating their cases. Industry, or what we call allied professionals, are those industries that interact in some capacity with consumers or potential victims, such as a bank, a mortgage lender, or a retailer who is offering financing for their service or products. And these oftentimes are the medium perpetrators use to commit the identity theft. And of course, the victim or social service agencies who do assist victims with the fallout of their identity crime, whether it be an organization like ITRC that directly addresses identity theft, or another organization that can address general crime and point them in all the directions that they need, or especially important, the victim service providers who work with specific victim populations due to their unique needs, like the elderly or domestic violence. And what the coalitions found is that there were so many voices that needed to be at the table, whether it was financial industries, insurance, victim service providers, senior advocates. What included everyone, and they found the more they started digging and finding some partners they saw a need elsewhere, and having these key stakeholders really allowed these coalitions to make the headway they needed in all areas to help victims. All of these industries in some way either come into contact or work with victims, and you need to have all of these key stakeholders represented at the table. And so after you've established your stakeholders and you've identified who you need to have at the table, your next step should be assessing the strengths of your members and what they can contribute to the collaboration. From this, you can identify the level of participation from your members and what roles they can potentially play. The Iowa Organization for Victim Assistance, one of our coalitions, which is a statewide organization in Iowa that generally focuses on identity theft crime versus a specific population, they actually utilize previous partnerships with their AG's office to participate and assist in developing and hosting trainings. And by playing on that strength, they not only were able to reach victim service organizations to build their capacity and knowledge, but they were also able to raise awareness and help fortify potential victims in being able to protect themselves. So being able to reach both sides of the coin, if you will, was actually really important. Not all coalitions focused on that, since the whole point of this is to build the capacity of the service providers who are helping these victims, but being able to do more than you anticipated is always a good thing, and the more people you can educate, the better. Preventative measures are definitely something that's important when it comes to identity crime. And the Massachusetts Attorney General's Office, who focused on seniors and identity theft, they conducted an initial assessment of the services their members offered right from the beginning, and they used that to identify the strengths of services as well as the gaps of services in their area. And from that, they created a directory that was immediately available to all of their members, so the members knew who did what and what areas they all needed to improve on. And this is really good for you, not only as a coalition or collaborative effort leader, but your members need to understand the strengths and opportunities for growth within your coalition for the work and goals you wish to achieve in helping identity crime victims. And a big plus that I heard from a lot of the coalition leaders was a reduction in duplication of efforts. Sharing resources already available is a simple way to build capacity without having to do a formal training, and it helps prevent multiple organizations from all creating different variations of the same resource. Why reinvent the wheel if you don't need to? And one of our coalition leaders, Georgia Watch, actually utilized partnerships developed through a previous project where they conducted training in the community, as well as the partnerships they developed in conducting these different trainings. And in utilizing that strength and those resources previously developed, they didn't have to reinvent the wheel and do everything from scratch. Just because you're starting maybe a new collaborative effort or initiative, you don't have to do everything over. Georgia Watch was able to update many of their current trainings, as well as work with their partners to begin new training modules. So they also leaned on the strength of one of their partnerships with the AG's office, and they are working with them on a joint effort to address small business identity theft through a partnership in training and hosting workshops. And these different presentations and the resources built, a lot of these are available through the NITVAN Toolkit, and you can also, of course, contact these coalitions directly, especially if they're in your area, if you're interested in being a member, seeing what resources they have available. They are the experts in their respective areas. So they are definitely the ones to go to if you're interested in any training or resources that they have available. And sharing resources can be done periodically via member meetings, a web page dedicated to the coalition, using an online platform such as Slack to share up-to-date information and let your members know when new resources are available. Or you can also use these platforms to encourage discussion about available and needed resources. A key to collaborative efforts is getting people to work together, breaking those silos, and sharing resources and talking about these resources is a great start to that. Our Iowa coalition, as well as our Minnesota coalition, which was led by the Minnesota Alliance on Crime, they both utilize a newsletter format as a platform to provide up-to-date information within their state on laws, scams, and let their members know about new resources and training opportunities available. And as this is the electronic age and technology keeps growing and changing, it's important that you should utilize any technology software versus doing the traditional in-person meeting, especially, if you are in a collaborative effort that is statewide. It's really hard to get people to travel to you, which I know some of the coalitions experience. So using the online webinar platforms and any electronic means to where you can engage your members outside of having them meet face-to-face is always a plus. And from what the coalition shared with me, they were very successful in continuing that engagement versus just focusing on the traditional meetings. These different methods to share resources and develop resources allows your members to have buy-in, to take ownership of the coalition, its objectives, and achieving those goals, which for your collaborative effort to continue, your members have to see the benefit of it and basically have that drive to meet the mission the same as you as a coalition leader would. So another way of building capacity that was very popular and a focus through NITVAN was train the trainer. And this allowed the coalitions to address different training requests, and it was done in a presentation seminar format. And I stated before, building capacity was a key focus of general ID theft knowledge, and this was a lot of the training that was requested. And in talking with the coalition leaders and seeing the trainings they did, it was astounding to see the lack of general knowledge, not only just of the different components of identity crime, but the resources available in your state. I mean, oftentimes just being able to refer a victim to the right place, having the knowledge of knowing who can assist, is an important thing for the victim that's contacting you. And as talking before, don't reinvent the wheel. Make sure your presentations are evergreen, your training curriculum is evergreen, that it is something that can be used, and that you are utilizing your partners for presentations whenever you can. Georgia Watch was amazing at this as well, in utilizing their partners for presentations. The Minnesota Alliance on Crime utilized different partners in their area The Massachusetts Attorney General's office did the same, and they found by utilizing their partners, they had a wider reach, a wider impact of building capacity among service providers, as well as empowering victims to protect themselves. And this train-the-trainer format provides a positive domino effect. You train 10 organizations, they can then go and train 10 individuals and so on and so forth, and the capacity is building itself without you having to do anything after that initial training. So it's, I think, a key theme here with how to work with less and how to achieve what you can with the resources you have versus always having to look outside of your coalition for training or for someone to develop a curriculum. All of that skill set and knowledge was within the coalition, and that wouldn't be possible if they hadn't really took the time to build their stakeholder group like they did. Another prime example of this was our only Native American coalition, the Women's Spirit Coalition, that serves the 29 federally recognized tribes in the state of Washington. Their focus is within the context of domestic violence in Native American communities, and they expanded their services to include identity theft and cybercrime. They conducted recently a train-the-trainer event with a key partner they had established in the Northwest region of Washington that they were able to train multiple members and potential members at one time, and immediately the feedback was amazing. I didn't know this. I can now bring this back to my organization. We feel equipped to be able to start expanding our services to help victims in our communities who experience this. And that's the whole point of the collaborative effort. You don't necessarily need to make this huge impact right away. I know having a huge impact is amazing and does demonstrate to you the great work you're doing, but those incremental changes, you know, if an organization now has the ability to make a referral to the correct place, that's better than them having to turn that victim away, which unfortunately in the beginning of this coalition work, a lot of coalitions found their members either turn them away or weren't able to adequately assist them. And the trainer-trainer aspect of these coalitions really did help build that capacity and allowed it to, like I said before, that domino effect to keep going after that initial training. And of course, aside from resources, information sharing is just as important. And this can range from, you know, information that comes from your members about new services they have or new programs, updates they've made to their services, or sharing federal and state laws impacting members' ability to assist victims. Staying up to date in this particular field, because identity crime is ever-changing and growing, perpetrators are getting smarter, unfortunately, and it's just not going to go away. So staying on top of this information is important, and having a platform for your members to share information with each other, such as a listserv, regular meetings. This ensures everyone has access and encourages everyone to talk with each other. Again, breaking the silos, organizations, different industries working independently of each other only causes more confusion and issues for the victim, and again, leads to that duplicative effort, people not having the updated information they need. So making sure your members are able to communicate with each other, or if your collaborative effort was the foundation for them to begin working outside of the coalition, that networking, that collaborative nature among industries, to me, was a key goal of what these coalitions have been doing. And making sure everyone has the same information alleviates confusion on what is accurate, and it, again, allows that buy-in and that ownership of your members. They have a say in the information the coalition is putting out. They are able to review the fact sheets, the flyers, the pamphlets, the curriculum that is put out. So it is representative of their work, and again, it's something they have buy-in for your coalition. While you want your members to be able to bring something to the table, you also need to make sure you're providing them benefits, and the building capacity piece is so important. And building their capacity also helps show them the value of your coalition, and it's something that can be everlasting even if you decide your collaborative effort is done, it needs to end, or take a shift in what you focus on. That initial capacity building will live with your members in perpetuity. And as mentioned before, a lot of the coalitions opt to share information via different ways. The two that shared via newsletter. There were also others that utilized periodic email blasts, creating a landing page or a website dedicated to their coalition. And essentially, you making available a one-stop shop for information, resources, and updates is really imperative to keep everyone on the same page and progressing towards the goals you have for your efforts. So one of the great things about the NITVAN coalitions is they were able to achieve cross-victimization assistance and were able to address the needs of certain special and vulnerable populations. And one of them was seniors and financial exploitation. And one of the most prevalent cross-victimizations that I've seen in working with the coalitions is working with seniors via financial exploitation. According to FTC in 2018, 65,134 identity theft complaints were received from adults 60 years and older, which is approximately 15% of total complaints. This population is a prime target for financial exploitation and identity theft. Based on the assets these seniors have saved and built during their professional lives, they're seen as potentially more stable, having more of what the perpetrators want to take. And seniors can also be targeted due to the isolation and loneliness that they may experience, especially if they live in rural areas, that can increase their vulnerability. On top of, in general, this population is not considered the most savvy when it comes to new and changing technology. So all these factors play into them being the perfect victim, unfortunately. And while formal definitions can vary state to state, in general, financial exploitation is improper use of an adult's funding or resources by another individual, whether it be a caregiver, neighbor, or family member. And as you all know, exploitation can take many forms, such as fraud, forgery, or denial of access to assets. And a secondary outcome of this is definitely identity theft. And assisting this victim population not only includes addressing their immediate concerns with mitigating the issue and the financial exploitation components, but also potential additional economic repercussions, such as needing additional social services, emergency food and housing assistance because their benefits were taken by a perpetrator and now they don't know if they'll be able to keep their home and they're not able to take care of their basic needs. But for this population, there are also non-economic needs, such as addressing the emotional and mental toll that this experience can have on an individual, especially seniors. And oftentimes, the senior victim has to deal with the emotional, mental aftermath of the loss of security and potentially the loss of their independence, facing financial hardship when many are on a fixed income that can result in dependency on relatives or government aid programs to make ends meet. And they, in particular, experience the fear, shame, and guilt over their situation, which can also lead to them further isolating themselves and becoming depressive and just very morose, down and out about their situation and how will I ever get out of this. We have 4 coalitions that focused on assisting seniors: the Elder Law of Michigan Coordinating Council, New York Finger Lakes Identity Theft Coalition, Massachusetts Attorney General's Office, and the Onondaga County Elder Identity Theft Coalition located in New York. They all created excellent training and various resources available, not only just about financial exploitation, but the unique circumstances and needs of the elderly within the context of identity theft. Again, a lot of this is available in the toolkit, as well as reaching out to these coalitions directly, which you can do through nitvan.org. Another cross-victimization addressed was coerced debt within the context of identity theft as a secondary crime of domestic violence. And oftentimes, this secondary crime of identity theft is a means of control for the abuser to keep the victim under their power and uses leverage to keep them from leaving. And this was the focus of 2 coalitions, the Women's Spirit Coalition, as mentioned before, and the Texas Coalition on Coerced Debt. The Texas Coalition focused on coerced debt within the context of domestic violence. And coerced debt is a debt incurred from an abuser in the name of the victim who experienced the domestic violence or financial abuse. In the state of Texas, a law was recently passed that became effective September 1st that amended their definition of identity theft in Texas to specifically include debts an abuser compelled the victim to take out in their name by using force or threat. So this coalition is, really pioneering the changes being made in their state, which again ties into making sure your members are aware of the different laws that can potentially impact how you help victims. In this case, this was a monumental achievement for those prosecutors and victim service organizations wanting to assist these victims, and they are doing a lot of work around this, educating, and they also put out a course that toolkit in partnership with their Texas Council on Family Violence key partner, and this is an excellent resource I recommend you all take a look at that provides victims and service providers with an understanding of what course debt is, how a victim can protect themselves, how to figure out if you're a victim, and most importantly, how to fight what has happened and dispute the course debt and mitigate this unique form of identity theft. You can download this toolkit at financialabuse.org, and it's also available on the NITVAN Toolkit. And as I said before, Women's Spirit Coalition focused on expanding services to domestic violence victims that included identity theft, and for them it was specifically within tribal communities. This, for them, included providing referrals and resources that are tribal and cultural specific, which when working with particular populations, that is a need that cannot always be met by entities that don't have an understanding, and in this case, non-tribal entities. And given crimes can occur within and outside of a tribal community, this coalition also diligently works as a liaison between local and state government agencies in providing tribal-specific practices, cultural awareness, and priorities that can impact the policies and services available to Indigenous victims, whether they be urban, rural. They basically want to represent everyone. And that collaboration with these different specializations and being able to achieve cross-victimization, I think, is a highlight of what the coalitions have done in their work. And of course, working with tribal communities was another thing that we did. And one of the challenges many coalitions had was working with tribal communities and their victim service counterparts in these communities. They all wanted to have these stakeholders at the table, but it was definitely a bit harder than anticipated. It was identified early on that there is a need for collaboration within these communities, but again, the coalition struggled with this. Women's Spirit Coalition, as well as the Identity Theft Advocacy Network of Colorado, led by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, both work closely with the federally recognized tribes in their respective states, Washington and Colorado. Cultural competency has been key to successful partnerships with the coalition leaders and their tribal members. And one of the best practices learned that was shared with me by these coalitions and working with these tribal communities and entities is requesting assistance and seeking partnership with entities already established that have trust and credibility within these communities. Consistent communication and constantly engaging these entities, whether it be through speaking engagements, community events, or just keeping that line of communication open, was something that Women's Spirit was able to do to get their foot in the door, to get people to listen and want to expand their services to include ID theft and cybercrime. And as is the case with many organizations providing a service within a community, if your coalition's mission is not necessarily in line with that of the organization you're seeking to engage, at times you're required to sell your purpose and demonstrate why resources should be diverted from whatever cause or service they're focusing on to what you want to make an impact on. It honestly took Women's Spirit Coalition a good part of a year to finally achieve that inclusion and buy-in within the tribal communities they serve, and they are a tribal entity themselves. But again, once they were able to achieve that needed buy-in, they hit the ground running, planning training that they successfully hosted in December, being able to develop curriculum specific to the needs of the populations they serve, and really begin to make that impact that took them so long to achieve. But even though it may take some time with consistent communication and always keeping that line of communication open, it will definitely pay off in the end and working towards getting these stakeholders at the table. And honestly, the recruitment and outreach is something that's never ending with the coalition. And then finally, another cross-victimization that was a big focus was business identity theft and cybercrime, which was led by our Cybercrime Support Network Coalition and the National Cybersecurity Society. A lot of times, identity theft is commonly associated with individual victimization, but a business can be a victim as well. And as we see with the number of data breaches steadily growing, it's apparent that a business is just as susceptible to its information being compromised as an individual. But the resources available to businesses is not the same as it is to an individual, including reporting options and remediation services. these two coalitions focused on the gaps in services for this particular victim population, with National Cybersecurity Society developing a research paper that you can access through NITVAN.org that reviews the business ID theft landscape and gaps in services. The training was also done on general knowledge to build the understanding of the types of scams and identity crimes that can impact a business, such as business email compromise or phishing, and how these businesses can take preventative measures. And one of the outcomes I noticed in working with my coalitions that a lot of businesses thought, well, I'm a small business, they're not going to come after me, I have nothing to worry about, they want to go after a big company like Amazon. But the truth is, if you don't have proper cybersecurity measures in place, you're considered low-hanging fruit that's easy to access. Why would a perpetrator work harder to go after information from an organization that has better security measures when your company is an easy target? So building that awareness and bridging the gaps in services was definitely a focus of these coalitions, and they continue to make headway as things go on and continue to educate business. And the Cybercrime Support Network has actually developed a website dedicated to this, as well as assisting individuals experiencing cybercrime. That website is fraudsupport.org. Their information is also available on the NITVAN.org website. And these coalitions are slowly working and making headway in decreasing the gaps in services for businesses who are victims. And definitely check out their work. They have a lot of resources available, and especially the Cybercrime Support Network, what they're doing in not only effectively engaging their stakeholders, utilizing resources, and having everyone breaking those silos with the local, state, and federal level. They are working towards achieving a national hotline for cybercrime victims, as well as standardized reporting methods, so we can better have an understanding of the cybercrime landscape. And while that is definitely a huge goal to be achieved over a period of time, they're making headway through the collaborations and partnerships they've established with their coalition that is continuing to progress them further. So just to kind of share the impact that NITVAN has made since these additional coalitions were brought on from October 2017 through September of last year, all of these coalitions combined were able to provide training to 2,955 victim service providers, advocates, and industry professionals. And after building that capacity, as reported by these coalition members, 3,551 identity theft victims were assisted. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that is just a drop in the bucket. However, that's 3,500 more victims that received help from these organizations where before they weren't able to help them or had to turn them away. And impacted stakeholders did include the tribal communities, domestic violence, and senior services to enhance their services and have that impact that they were looking for that couldn't be done with them operating individually within their own missions and within their own silos. And these coalition efforts allowed for greater inclusion of all of these different victim groups impacted by identity theft as a secondary crime, which is really important because of the complexity of identity theft and the different subpopulations of victims that can be affected. A collaborative effort that truly represents all those that will work with all of the different types of victims is really important. So again, the NITVAN Toolkit is available on NITVAN.org, where you can learn more about the coalitions and download the toolkit. And if you are interested in training opportunities, what resources coalitions have available, definitely reach out to them. As I said before, they are the experts in their area, and they're the ones that you would want to go to for assistance if you are in their area. All right, that was all I had, and if anyone has any questions or comments, I am happy to answer that along with Laura.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Sarah. This has been great information. A lot of it is stuff that I'm familiar with, but I hope everybody has learned something and gotten some contacts. I definitely encourage you to go to the NITVAN website, particularly if you're in those areas. Learn about what coalitions are out there and what they do and how they can help you. Like I said, if you have questions, go ahead and type them down there in the Q&A box. We'll give you guys a couple of minutes to do that. And in the meantime, one thing I definitely wanted to add, in the beginning, Sarah, you had the slide on the aftermath study that you guys do, which is really great. I'm so glad you included that, because I think we all have an obligation to help people understand how much of a problem identity crimes and other types of fraud really are. And it's not just the amount of money lost. The emotional toll on some victims who are going through really, really severe, complex identity theft, and victims that are going through other types of very devastating fraud. It's just can't really be understated. And I think a lot of times people are kind of comparing them to other types of crimes, maybe even violent crimes, and thinking, well, the violent crimes are more serious and are more emotionally devastating. And that sometimes is true, but not all the time. In presentations that I do, I like to always tell people, give people an example of a victim of assault. For instance, somebody who's gone through an assault by a stranger, yes, they're definitely going to have injuries, potentially physical injuries, psychological injuries, but hopefully that sort of victim is not going to have long-term injuries and long-term emotional effects. Whereas I think if you are working with a victim of identity theft who has been totally devastated by this crime, who's lost, lots and lots of money, maybe even their life savings, this could affect them for the rest of their entire lives. And so it can be incredibly devastating. And I think it's our obligation to make sure people know that and train people that know that, or train when we go out and talk in our communities, make sure people know the impact of these sorts of crimes. So that's my 2 cents. I don't see any questions popping up, but that's all right. We can let you guys go a little bit early. Thank you all so much for joining. We will be sending out a follow-up email. There's one that's popped up in the chat box there. It's about robocalls. Do you have any ideas on suggestions on what advice to give to the older adult community about robocalls? From my perspective, there are things that you can do to block robocalls. You're not going to be able to block all of them, but there is technology that has been created. I think one that comes to mind is called No More Robo. And if you Google it, you should be able to find some information on it. Cutting down the amount of solicitations that people get can be helpful. It's not going to solve the problem because, like I said, some robocalls and scam calls are still going to probably come through. As much as you can talk to older adults and educate them about how these things happen, that can be helpful. When we're dealing with people that have significant mental impairments or cognitive issues, it can be hard, and unfortunately there's not always a great solution there. But educating the community is probably another thing to consider. Sarah, do you have anything to add there?
Well, I think to keep these kinds of things at the forefront of victims, especially with seniors, give them something that they can easily reference that is suited to them, that is easily readable, ADA compliant. And 2 coalitions did actually create a large magnet that they were giving out at different outreach events. Vera House, as well as the Finger Lakes Region Identity Theft Coalition, they created a magnet that a senior can have on their fridge, keep near their phone, so they knew what to look for. It was a constant reminder for them. Oftentimes, just speaking one time with a potential victim or consumer is not enough. They need to have something to take away that they can have in their homes, in their place of business, that is a reminder for them. These are the things you should look out for. These are the things that you shouldn't do. An outreach campaign is potentially a good idea as well. I know a lot of the coalitions through social media, we're working on increasing awareness, and my organization, ITRC, is also doing something similar to that. We call it KBI, where we focus on millennial populations as well as senior populations in getting them to understand what to look out for and to just say bye and hang up, hence KBI. So there are a lot of different methods that you can use, but I just recommend something that will stick in your potential victim's mind. And with these coalitions, they did an amazing job. I see a question here. Are these websites available in Spanish? That is something that we are working on. I am not positive if some of the other coalition pages are in Spanish or if they have that translation available, but that is something we are working to make available for the NITVAN.org website. But yes, it's really important to make sure that you do reach these different demographics and represent the different languages, especially because for a lot of people in the U.S., English is not their first language, and we definitely have to make sure we accommodate that and are aware of that.
All right, and I did want to, Lori DiCaprioli, she is one of our coalition leaders, and she was kind enough to post in the chat box some of the resources for blocking robocalls and limiting other sorts of scams. So you can scroll through the comments there and see those. Thank you so much, Lori, for posting that. And then she also mentioned the scam-free magnet that Sarah mentioned, that she is happy to provide a picture of it if you're interested, and she has her email in the chat box too. And then she posted a comment more back towards the building and developing coalitions. She just said some partners may be more challenging to work with than others. They may want to be part of the work, but their priorities, like timing, may be a little bit different than yours. So she said, encourage people to just keep reaching out, it might be baby steps, progress may be slow, but it will be made, and that the benefit of the coalition work is worth it. So thank you so much, Lori. I appreciate all of your input. And now I'm kind of thinking we should have you be a co-presenter on this, but I really appreciate you jumping in at the end here, and Sarah for putting together this great PowerPoint for us. So thanks, everybody, and we'll let you go. We'll leave the information up here for another second or two, but I hope everyone has a great day and continues to join us for additional webinars in the future. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.